Leslie, Cynthia, go ahead.
Thank you, everyone, for coming here and sharing your time with us. First, I actually want to acknowledge a question that I get a lot, which is why even include Falun Gong in these types of discussions, and I'm glad that IRI has gifted us the opportunity to speak on this topic. I am not ethnically a minority. I am Han Chinese. I was born here in the States. Most Falun Gong practitioners that I know are also Han Chinese. And so in America, I understand the difficulty of seeing it as a China versus China issue because Falun Gong is a religion. It's not an ethnic minority. It's not even a political boundary like Hong Kong. So it's very difficult for people who haven't experienced China to really understand why Falun Gong is so important to the Chinese Communist Party. And so today I really wanted to answer that essential question. Some of you may know, for 26 years now, the Chinese Communist Party has waged an all-encompassing campaign to eradicate the religious group Falun Gong, and the CCP's vast operation has employed a range of brutal tactics, demonstrating both ability and intent to suppress this faith group, silence dissent even abroad, and erode basic God-given rights in America and beyond. Falun Gong today remains one of the most censored topics in China, but it's still possible to get a sense of the scale and scope of the persecution from various sources. My remarks today draw on 4 main sources, which are Chinese government documents, first-hand reports from inside China, 4 years of my own research, including interviews with survivors, refugees, relatives of religious prisoners, and victims of transnational repression. And I will make 5 main points today. The first is Falun Gong was immensely popular and is still practiced by millions. This point is underreported, but what exactly is the Chinese regime afraid of? This is no small religious group. In Chinese, Falun Gong is 修炼, or in English, you translate that to cultivation. It's a mind-body discipline that combines meditation, which is a Buddhist tradition, and moral philosophy of truth, compassion, forbearance, which is 真善忍 in Chinese. After its public dissemination in China, as you can see, this practice was adopted by tens of millions of Chinese citizens across the nation. Imagine this just in your mind for a second. You wake up, you go to work, every single park is filled with people meditating peacefully. Falun Gong was mainstream, with even some Chinese Communist Party officials and military members practicing. Yet from the party's perspective, its scale and independence posed a challenge to the regime's hold on power. So in 1999, Jiang Zemin issued the fateful order to wipe out Falun Gong in 3 months. After over 26 years of brutality, this goal remains unachieved. It's a complete failure. In 2017, Freedom House estimated 7 million to 20 million practitioners still believed in Falun Gong and were practicing it in China, terming it a striking failure of the CCP's security apparatus. And globally, as you can see here, Falun Gong has spread to 108 countries, its text translated in over 50 languages. My second point is, in recent years, crushing Falun Gong has resurfaced as a major security priority, to put it bluntly. Some may think that the crackdown mostly happened in the early 2000s, but in fact, it's still very much continuing in 2025. Obviously, there have been ups and downs in the intensity of the crackdown, with repression spiking around sensitive political periods, especially the 2008 Beijing Olympics and 2022, when the whole world is looking at Beijing to see what it's doing. We also saw a brief lull during Xi Jinping's first term, where he purged officials like Zhou Yongkang, who were the driving force for much brutality meted out to Falun Gong practitioners and other groups. The persecution carried on without its lead perpetrator, but the police weren't as aggressive during this period without the top-down pressure. We have a quote here in the 2017 report from Freedom House. The crackdown suffered from a bureaucratic leadership gap, opening space for sympathetic local officials to adopt a more lenient approach, which makes sense. However, this trend has now reversed in Xi Jinping's second and third term, and this is where I want to focus on. We now see an escalation, and according to Chinese official documents and directives, prioritization of Falun Gong is central to maintaining political security. During the pandemic, many Falun Gong practitioners like Fang Bing and Xu Na became COVID whistleblowers, further drawing ire of Chinese security forces. One data point, for example, hundreds of cases post-COVID of Falun Gong practitioners who previously escaped arrest for over a decade were, in the past 3 years, detained and sentenced to prison, including elderly in their 80s and 90s. So this is a death sentence. This fits in the broader pattern of the past 5 years. Chinese security agencies have paired legacy transformation campaigns with newer, shinier tools. Big data-enabled neighborhood monitoring in China, grid management, stability maintenance quotas, WeChat petitions on social media, and facial recognition devices in every train station and public transport. My third point is Chinese people who practice Falun Gong and their families continue to be detained and sentenced to long prison terms. This is an image of a family who both mother and father died in the recent 5 years, and the son is now left an orphan, and he's only in elementary school. Practitioners face arrest nationwide, yes, but the scale and density is the largest in the northeast regions near Beijing, including Jilin, Shandong, and Liaoning. Many are punished for exercising free expression, exposing rights abuses online on public platforms, and discussing the persecution in public, or even sharing technology with fellow neighbors and community members to jump the Great Firewall. Sometimes detentions are even triggered by simple religious practice, like possessing spiritual text or gathering together to study them. Between 2022 and 2025, over 10,000 practitioners were arbitrarily detained or harassed, with over 2,000 sentenced up to 15 years following sham trials. Even these figures, drawn from crowdsourced grassroots documentation, almost certainly undercount the true scale given the censorship. My fourth point is Falun Gong practitioners are dying in custody due to torture and forced organ harvesting. Once in custody, they are subject to systematic physical and mental torture aimed at making them renounce their faith. This brutality routinely leads to deaths in custody or shortly after release, and I've encountered this grief firsthand. The photo that you see here is Simon Zhang. Simon is an architect in Brooklyn, and his mother was detained in Inner Mongolia. So Simon took the trek down to the hill. He was in multiple congressional briefings and panels, but we actually found out within 40 days she had passed away from the torture in custody. The family was even barred from holding a proper funeral to respect her. Simon was denied a visa to go back to China to grieve, and the authorities cremated her body without even getting family consent. But such deaths are not limited to older victims. Another case is Pang Xun, a state media radio host who was arrested for distributing Falun Gong advocacy flyers in a park. Within 4 months at Leshan prison in Sichuan, he was killed. They tortured him to death. And if there's any children in the audience or anyone who can't take this type of content, please look away. This is a clip from a video his parents actually took of him, and his aunt was there as well. It went viral on X last year, which is why we can see it today.
太遭遇了，你看着。
太遭遇了，这妈妈爸爸不在你身边就这样受欺负啊！ 这是共产党的天下呀！我放心啦，放心的，爸爸妈妈啊，哎。
So unfortunately, these are just a few specific examples, about an average of over 100 documented deaths that make it overseas that we actually get the information and we actually get documentation of, which doesn't even cover the victims of forced organ harvesting. I'm going to skip this because I know people in previous panels have already talked about it. My fifth point is the regime's persecution has spread outside of China. In the past 2 years, at least 5 Chinese spies were sentenced in the US for Article 951, the foreign agents criminal law, including for spying, interfering, and sending information on Falun Gong to higher Chinese officials. But transnational repression is not a new phenomenon. Beijing has targeted Falun Gong for a very long time. Here you'll see in Houston, in front of the consulate, employees came out, and my mom is actually in the back to egg us when we were meditating outside. This is Johannesburg, South Africa in 2004, where a Falun Gong practitioner was actually shot on his way to an appeal for a high-ranking Chinese official meeting. This is Atlanta, Georgia in 2006. He was working on censorship circumvention technology, and he was beat in his own home by people who trespassed. This is in Buenos Aires in Argentina, and these are just a few cases. My team documented a dramatic increase in death threats, including ones targeting our staff. Since March 2024, there are over 184 death threats targeting Falun Gong practitioners, our families, affiliated organizations, supporters, and even government officials, including ones in the previous administration and the current. Among these, a significant portion have been targeted at Shenyun Performing Arts, a global renowned music and dance group founded by Falun Gong practitioners and dancers who fled China and who wanted to tell their story. From the above, we can see Beijing's playbook plainly. Social media and mainstream media disinformation, violent threats, frivolous lawsuits, co-opting government, and malicious impersonation. The end goal is to alienate our faith group, saddle practitioners with mental and financial burdens, and turn the American public against us. The CCP's increasingly aggressive outlook is posing a threat to our American way of life. Its demonstrated capabilities and constantly evolving repression tactics against Falun Gong will be used against anyone and any American entity who dares to question the CCP's tactics. And to conclude, as one Chinese lawyer said, trying to explain why she risked her career and was even disbarred because she protected Falun Gong clients, today Falun Gong is being persecuted and I speak for them. I speak for Falun Gong today. In fact, I also speak for my own future. Thank you.
All right, we have a little bit of time for questions. If you have any questions, please raise your hand.
The key thing for me in this panel and in all of my research is I really think the human spirit is unbreakable. Even though technology can be used for bad and it is being used for bad, you know, there's always ways to circumvent technology. Human creativity is unlimited, and so we have seen cases of using VPNs to even, for our organization, to contact inside China through an untraceable link or untraceable method. And I wanted to bring up a story because every single month I get to talk to people who've recently fled China, and even in 2025, you know, the Chinese security apparatus doesn't even know they're outside of China until like 6 months later. We had a professor from Beijing who literally just booked a flight and left to come, you know, reunite with his son in California, and they didn't know until 6 to 8 months later, and then they were blowing up his phone, like, where did you go? And he was like, I'm in Guangzhou. And then 2 weeks later, they're like, we went to Guangzhou, you're not in Guangzhou. And he was like, actually, I'm like at another seminar in this city, in Shanghai or whatever. And they actually didn't know where he went. So I think it does speak to the power of, you know, this is a huge apparatus. Between provinces, they don't really communicate with each other. So there are ways to slip in through the gaps. And I think the end goal is actually not the technology. The technology is just a tool. The end goal is really fighting for the hearts and the minds of the Chinese people, trying to justify this repression, trying to justify atheism, trying to justify Xi Jinping's ideology. So I think, if this was like a fantasy football team, are you team CCP or are you team freedom? I think that's something that the Chinese people have to choose, because Americans have already been quite clear about it. So it's just in the hands of Chinese people, whether they are swayed by the disinformation or they're able to use VPN and actually access information overseas.